Hi there, Steve Kaufmann here again. Gonna do another little chat. I put up that last little discussion, and I noticed that you know how it is on YouTube. If you look up some web video chat that you have just done, you'll see some related um, YouTubes, and so I saw some that were quite interesting. One was something by a British professor or language teacher who talked about language learning in Web 2.0. And you might find that if you look up one of my videos, you might see his. But my impression of his presentation, it was a 9-minute presentation. It was much saluted by all the teachers. But I think he misunderstood, and he saw Web 2.0 as yet another tool by which the teachers can sort of control the activities of students and learners. And I think Web 2.0 is about the learners taking over. And the differences between learners and teachers are kind of blurred. Everyone contributes, everyone's a consumer, everyone's a producer, people make sound files, people learn from what they're interested in. They don't have to follow the teacher's agenda. They don't have to do sort of make work projects that the teacher assigns them. Ideally, they get out of the classroom, which is a relatively inefficient place to learn languages. So, but you might find that and have a look at it. I was not that impressed with what was there. There was a series of webcams by a professor, Alexander Argelis, I don't know how he pronounces his name. Before I go into that one, there was a discussion of Michel Thomas, of his very successful method. He has sold lots. He taught movie stars and charged a fortune for doing so. I have listened to Michel Thomas trying to teaching German, which is his native language. He also does them in Italian and Spanish and French, where apparently he has a pretty bad accent because his accent in English is a sort of a very strong Central European accent. But he's been tremendously successful. But I listened to this explanation of his theory, and I'm not. It is obvious that different people learn in different ways, and many people are very happy with Michel Thomas and his method of teaching. But there's many things there that I just don't agree with. He says, for example, that there are no bad students, there are only bad teachers. If you can't learn, it's my fault, the teacher. Well, I just don't believe that. I think the teacher is irrelevant. I wouldn't say irrelevant, but the teacher in terms of teaching the language is not necessary. The teacher as a resource, as a person who encourages, as a person who provides feedback, who inspires, who stimulates, all of those things, yes. And I see that more as the role of a tutor, as someone looking over someone else, someone who has already learned languages and is providing some support and encouragement to someone else. All of that is great. Teaching the language, I just don't see it. I think you learn the language from the language. He works very hard on getting people to say things very quickly, but he doesn't cover a lot of vocabulary. And to me, the whole thing about language learning, and if you want to be able to speak and converse and be comfortable in many situations, you need a lot of words. He doesn't cover a lot of words. He tries to get you to speak from the beginning. Okay, some people want to do that. It's not what I want to do. I'm not interested in constructing whole sentences early just so that I can say, what is the color of your white horse? I want to learn words. Some of the things that I do agree with, he says it's important to relax. I think there are many people who create these mental blocks for themselves, that they are too nervous to relax, to enjoy the language. He says, get out of your own way. I agree. Sometimes people are their own worst enemies. They're too hung up about grammar. They're hung up about how they sound. They're hung up about being able to get out of their own culture and so forth. So I agree with all of that. Another major part of his approach is that no reading. Well, I think reading is a tremendous way to access the culture and the language and learn words and so forth. So Michel Thomas obviously is very popular, and but so there was a YouTube of a lady explaining his system. Now there was another series of YouTubes where a person by the name of Professor Alexander Argelis reviews a number of the more popular language learning books. Teach Yourself, Assimil, Colloquial. I don't know if he did Pimsleur, Hugo. He goes literally through all of them, and he gives you a sort of a 9-minute explanation going back to the earlier versions of the 1920s and the 1930s. Interesting if you're interested in a history of different language learning methods. He deplores the fact that the methods are becoming simpler with a greater emphasis on phrases, and I agree with him there. You can't teach through unconnected phrases. You want interesting dialogue. He likes the idea that some of the earlier versions of some of these systems seem to follow the same format in every language, so that they would teach pronouns in lesson 1, verbs in lesson 2, and numbers in lesson 3, and so forth. To me, that's of limited benefit because every language is different. Some languages don't have articles. Some languages don't have the same range of tenses as other languages. He suggested that by learning language A, if the second book follows the same format, that'll help you learn language B. I don't see that at all. I don't think it really matters in what order you learn the grammar. You learn through interesting content. Some grammar concepts in, say, Japanese or Chinese or Russian are going to stick early, some later with some people than with others. So I didn't see that at all. He is very fond of these sort of artificial scenarios at the bank, at the post office, at the train station. And I've always felt those to be, to the extent that those dialogues are artificial, they're not that useful. I mean, you need, obviously in the beginning, you need some artificial dialogue because you can't deal with authentic content. It almost doesn't matter what that artificial dialogue is. It can be on anything. It doesn't have to be at the train station. You won't, or the bank, you won't be able to operate at the bank based on the scenario you learn. So you could be learning anything. It could be, how are you? What did you do with your children today? It could be anything. It really doesn't matter. So having sort of parallel scenarios that he talks about, I don't see the benefit. He talks about some of them having a 30-page glossary at the end of the book, and therefore you've learned all these words. Well, no, you haven't learned the words because there's a glossary. That's not how you learn words. You can't learn words by reading a glossary. The fact that some of the dialogues have all these words in them, fine. There's just so much better ways now to deal with learning words. Some of the things we think we're doing at Link that are good. I have never been able to learn words from a glossary. It's distracting to keep on having to look back to a glossary. That's the advantage of reading on the web. But I'm going to on my blog post, I'm going to post the URL for his website and for his YouTubes. One of the other things he's very fond of is what he calls shadowing, where you walk around, reciting these phrases and so forth. And I mean, I'm sure it works for people. It doesn't work for me. But everyone is different. So I just mention these things so that you can have a look and see what you think. I think a lot of this it just points out again to me how different people have different ways of learning. But I think it might be of interest to some people to explore some of the YouTubes that seem to collect around my YouTubes for whatever reason, having to do with how YouTube organizes itself. So if you go to the blog post, you'll see some of these URLs. Thank you for listening.